Mark Davis stood in the kitchen of his suburban home watching the morning sun stream through the windows as he prepared breakfast for two. It was a Tuesday like any other in their life together. 10 years of marriage had settled into a comfortable rhythm, a gentle dance they had perfected through late-night conversations and quiet mornings like this one. He cracked eggs into a bowl and smiled, thinking about how lucky he felt to have found someone who made coming home feel like arriving at peace. Lauren would be down in a few minutes. She always was. Their routines had become predictable, and Mark loved it that way. He loved the predictability because it meant security. It meant that their love had evolved from the wild passion of youth into something steadier and more real. Or so he thought. The new smart home device sat on the counter, gleaming in its silver finish. They had purchased it just last week to make their lives easier, to automate their heating and lighting and security systems. Lauren had been the one excited about it, researching features and benefits, while Mark had simply nodded along, content to let her lead. She loved technology, he loved her enthusiasm. He walked over to the device and said the activation phrase. Immediately, it began playing the playlist they had set it to shuffle through their favorite songs. As the music filled the kitchen, Mark found himself humming along, already in a good mood about the day ahead. That was when something strange happened. The device began playing an audio file that did not match their music library. It was a voice recording, something intimate and private. Mark froze, eyes widening in shock as he heard his wife's voice speaking words meant for someone else. His stomach dropped like he had fallen from a great height. The device had somehow recorded and was now playing back a personal conversation that Lauren had not intended for him to hear. His hands trembled as he reached for the device to turn it off, but he could not move fast enough. Every word that came through the speaker felt like a knife cutting deeper. His mind struggled to process what he was hearing. 10 years, a decade of mornings just like this one, a decade of believing in something that apparently had been a lie. Mark sank into a chair at the kitchen table, hands covering his face, as the realization began to truly sink in. The perfect life he thought he had was crumbling before him in real time. Everything he believed about his marriage, about his wife, about himself, was now in question. The morning sun that had seemed so warm just moments ago now felt cold and harsh. He heard Lauren's footsteps on the stairs.
The confrontation. Lauren appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing her work clothes, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked beautiful, like she always did, and for a moment, Mark wanted to pretend he had imagined everything. He wanted to go back to 5 minutes ago, when his world was still intact. But the smart device sat between them on the counter like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. She smiled at him, that same smile that had made him fall in love with her all those years ago. She said good morning, and moved to pour herself coffee, seemingly unaware that their entire marriage had just shifted on its axis. Mark watched her move through their kitchen with the ease of someone who knew every corner, every drawer, every habit of the space they shared. He could not find words. How do you accuse someone of betrayal? How do you ask them to explain the inexplicable? He stood up abruptly and walked to the smart device. Lauren noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. Her smile faded and her hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Mark took a breath and pressed play on the device. The recording filled the kitchen again. It was unmistakable now in broad daylight, with Lauren standing right there, her voice speaking words of passion and desire to someone who was not her husband. He watched as all the color drained from her face. She stumbled backward, gripping the counter for support. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The recording continued playing, and Lauren stood there listening to her own betrayal. Mark could see her mind working, could see her trying to formulate an explanation that would make sense of the inexplicable. There was no explanation that could fix this. When the recording finally ended, Lauren sank into a chair, and she began to cry. But Mark could not feel sympathy yet. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. He waited for her to speak, to confess, to explain something, anything that might help him understand how this had happened. Lauren looked up at him with eyes full of anguish and whispered his name like it was a question, like she was asking if he was still there, if he was still hers. But everything had changed in the span of a recording. Everything they had built, everything they believed about each other was now in ruins. The breakfast he had prepared sat cooling on the stove, untouched and forgotten.
Unraveling truths. Lauren finally found her voice, though it came out broken and shattered. She confessed everything, pouring out the story of how she had met him and how it had started. His name was Michael. He worked with her at the marketing firm, where she spent her days designing campaigns and building strategies. It had begun innocently, she claimed, during late nights at the office, working on projects that demanded their attention and creativity. Mark listened without interrupting, his jaw clenched so tightly he thought his teeth might crack. She told him how Michael had started staying late to help her, how their conversations had deepened over weeks and months, how they had found in each other something she could not quite articulate. She said she had not planned for it to happen, that it was not something she had chosen consciously. It had simply grown like a weed in the garden of their marriage without her knowing how to stop it. The lies began to unravel as she spoke. The conference trips that were not conferences. The extra hours at work that were actually stolen moments in hotel rooms downtown. The anniversary dinner she claimed she had worked late for when she had actually been with him. 3 months of deception, carefully constructed and maintained with meticulous attention to detail. Lauren had become an expert liar, and that hurt Mark almost as much as the affair itself. He asked her why. Why had she done this? Why had she risked everything they had built? Why had she chosen to throw away a decade of marriage for someone she barely knew? Lauren sat across from him, shoulders shaking as she cried, unable to give him an answer that would satisfy his need to understand. She said she did not know herself, that she had felt trapped, that she had felt unseen, that somewhere along the way their love had become comfortable, and that comfort had begun to feel like a cage. Mark stood up and walked away from the table. He could not sit there anymore, listening to her explain how their marriage had become a prison to her. He had thought they were happy. He had believed they were building something lasting, something real. But apparently, he had been the only one believing in their story, while she had been writing a different narrative entirely with someone else. The house suddenly felt too small. The walls seemed to be closing in. Mark grabbed his keys from the table and walked toward the door. He told Lauren he needed to leave, that he could not be in the house with her right now. She called after him desperately, but he did not turn around. He had to get away from her and from the wreckage of their marriage before he said something he could not take back.
Sarah stared at the velvet box on the coffee table, her entire body going numb as the reality crashed over her like a tidal wave. Ryan had been planning to propose tonight, on her birthday, and she had ruined everything with her selfishness and cowardice. "Open it," Ryan said, his voice cold and distant, nothing like the warm, loving tone she had woken up to this morning. "I want you to see what you threw away for someone who was just convenient." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring with small emeralds on the band, matching the dress she wore. Engraved inside were the words, "Forever starts today," and the date of her birthday, a date that would now be marked by heartbreak instead of joy. Ryan watched her reaction with hollow eyes. "I saved for 8 months to buy that ring. I planned this entire evening down to every detail. I even called your parents to ask for their blessing, and they were so happy, Sarah. Your father actually cried, and now I have to tell everyone that the woman I loved more than anything chose someone else." Sarah reached for him desperately, please don't leave. We can work through this. I'll end things with Marcus immediately. I'll do anything to fix this. I love you. I never stopped loving you." "That's the problem, Sarah," Ryan said, stepping back from her outstretched hands. "You say you love me, but love isn't just words, it's actions. It's choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard, even when doubts creep in. And you didn't choose me. You chose to lie to my face while planning a future with someone else." The front door opened, and Sarah's best friend Jessica walked in carrying birthday balloons. "Hey guys, I know I'm early, but I wanted to help set up for the surprise party tonight." She stopped mid-sentence, seeing Sarah's tear-stained face and Ryan's devastated expression. "There's no party," Ryan said quietly, picking up his jacket. "Tell everyone Sarah made other plans."
Jessica dropped the balloons and rushed to Sarah's side, concerned. "What happened? What's going on?" But Ryan was already walking toward the door, his shoulders heavy with the weight of broken dreams and shattered trust. Sarah couldn't speak. She could only watch as the man who had loved her unconditionally walked out of her life, taking with him 5 years of memories, laughter, inside jokes, and plans for a future that would never exist. Uncontrollable sobbing. Over the following weeks, Sarah learned the hardest lesson of her life, that trust, once broken, leaves scars that never fully heal. She had lost not just Ryan, but also the respect of friends and family who couldn't understand how she could betray someone so devoted. Marcus reached out several times, wanting to continue their relationship, but Sarah finally saw him for what he was, a temporary escape from fears she should have confronted honestly. He represented her own weakness, her inability to communicate when things got difficult, her pattern of running away instead of working through challenges. Ryan, meanwhile, struggled through his own healing process, learning that loving someone deeply doesn't mean they will love you the same way back. He attended therapy, talked to friends, and slowly rebuilt his sense of self-worth that had been demolished by betrayal. 3 months later, Sarah sat alone in her apartment on a Friday night, scrolling through old photos of happier times, and finally understood what she had lost. She had sacrificed a genuine connection, built on years of shared experiences, for the thrill of something new and exciting, without considering the consequences. The lesson she learned came too late, but it was clear. Selfishness destroys everything it touches. When we prioritize momentary desires over lasting commitments, we lose not just relationships, but parts of ourselves that trusted, loved, and believed in something real. Ryan eventually found peace, knowing he had given his best to someone who wasn't ready to receive it. And Sarah lived with the knowledge that her choices had cost her the one person who truly saw her, valued her, and wanted to build a life together. Sometimes, the most painful lessons teach us the most important truths: that honesty takes courage, that love requires sacrifice, and that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's green where you water it.